Hello, my name is Allison Carmen, and welcome to my podcast, 10 Minutes to Less Suffering. Today, I want to talk to you about feeling uncomfortable. And although it might not be pleasant and it might not feel good, when we're not willing to feel this way, we sometimes jump and we make decisions really quickly. And sometimes they're not thoughtful. And sometimes it hurts the people around us. Sometimes we make a business decision that's not best for ourselves or our family. We just want to keep moving in a direction, which is sometimes fine. But there are many times in our lives that when we feel uncomfortable, if we could pause and be still and allow that feeling, we might be able to get to the core of an issue. We might discover something about our business or relationship that needs to be fixed, and maybe gain a new perspective or collect our thoughts, or just allow someone to be heard. Life has uncomfortable moments, and sometimes it's through being uncomfortable that we're able to find out a lot about ourselves, about the people around us, and make the best decisions. This thought was really on my mind when I was reading this book that Byron Katie wrote. And for those of you who don't know Byron Katie's work, she's always talking about loving what is. She talks about how she's at peace with what's ever happening in her life. And at one point in her book, she was talking about sitting on a couch, and she was having this problem with her eyes, so she couldn't really see exactly what was happening. But she felt these little ants crawling up her leg. She described them as massage therapists. She said some of them tickled her, some of them bit her, but she just allowed the experience. She accepted the experience. Now for me, I had such a reaction to this because the minute I feel anything crawling on me, whether it's an ant or a fly lands on me, I actually feel very jumpy in my nervous system, and I might make a sound, and I immediately will throw the ant off me, and I'll throw the fly off of me, and I'll feel like I escaped some type of danger or discomfort. And it never occurred to me that I could just stay still and allow the experience. No, I'm not saying it would be a pleasant experience. It could be quite uncomfortable. But that was a choice to remain peaceful and just sit and allow. Sometimes when we feel uncomfortable, we never think about what would happen if we just sat with it. We act like we're going to die or something awful is going to happen, and then we don't give space for things. I'm not saying that letting an ant crawl on my leg is going to lead me to anything grand or great, but it did give me the realization of how I react quickly when I feel uncomfortable. And so the next day I was at a board meeting, and there was someone across the table from me that was saying something I didn't like. And I think in the past, I might have jumped in immediately. I might have defended my client immediately. I might have started to argue with someone before they were finished. And I realized I was uncomfortable with what he was saying. And I immediately thought about how an ant would feel crawling up my leg. And I realized that I could handle this. I could sit still. And I waited for him to finish. And as I was waiting, thoughts came to my mind like, just because he says it doesn't mean it's true. I know I did a podcast on it, but he was saying all these things that I didn't agree with. But just because he was saying it doesn't mean it was going to happen, doesn't mean anybody around the table would agree with him. When I thought more about it, I realized he didn't have the power to vote in any of his decisions. And as I sat there, when he was done, because I waited, because I felt uncomfortable, somebody else actually jumped in. And I think was the right person to argue against this guy's points. And I think it went really smoothly. I'm not saying that I couldn't have effectuated that, but it was so interesting to allow myself to be uncomfortable, to see that I didn't have to jump in immediately, that this person didn't really have the power, and I also gave space for the situation to be resolved without me lifting a finger. Now, pausing in our discomfort doesn't always mean that it's going to work that way, because sometimes we need to act. But allowing the discomfort allows ourselves to process it, to be more thoughtful about it, to allow wisdom to arise. And we're not going to be running around making all these rash decisions just because we have a feeling. You know, sometimes our feelings are like clouds, they pass. But when we don't allow them because they feel uncomfortable, we make decisions based on this feeling we just had in the moment. And then we end up in a situation we might not like. In fact, sometimes when we don't allow ourselves to be uncomfortable, we just exchange one problem for another problem. So how do we do this? How do we allow the discomfort of life, of what we're feeling, our emotions? How do we sit in it? How do we pause and become more responsive and thoughtful about things in our lives? And the first thing is we need to be aware of our discomfort and create a willingness to feel it. We have this feeling that if we feel it, we're doomed. If we feel it, things are going to blow up. If we feel it, the end is near. But often we find that we survive the discomfort. And I know many of you have survived painful things in your life, so why wouldn't you survive this uncomfortable feeling? And because we're willing to sit in the discomfort, we could ask ourselves, what's making me feel uncomfortable? Am I afraid of the future? What's going on with this relationship? Am I feeling not independent? Am I feeling dissatisfied? Is it me? Is it them? What will happen if I make this decision? Will my life really be better? Or will I be exchanging one problem for another because deep down maybe the problem's me? Or maybe I'm in a situation where I could work things out. If we feel stressed and worried about our business and it feels uncomfortable, maybe it's best not to pour more money into it unless there's a plan. Yes, we want answers. We want to solve problems. But sometimes the uncertainty is what we need to let things play out. Sometimes new opportunities come. Sometimes we get a sign that it's time to shut things down. Sometimes we get an idea that we didn't have on Monday, but we have it on Friday. So allowing ourselves to be uncomfortable is like creating a pause to allow something new to come in. And again, it doesn't create inaction. The stillness that we allow ourselves to feel when we're uncomfortable will give us the space within us to know if we need to act, we'll act, but it's not from fear. And it's not from being uncomfortable, it's from knowing that it's time to act. And if we don't know, then we're going to have the ability to sit and wait till we do. Not every question can be answered the moment we want it answered. And businesses take time to grow, and relationships sometimes have bumps, and we need to be patient to work them out. We won't want to keep shuffling our lives around to find that, yeah, we switched things up, but the deepest problem was us and our inability to sit still when we feel uncomfortable. And for some reason, for me, feeling an ant on my leg is so symbolic because I would have never stood still for that. And it just reminds me of all the things that I'm not willing to stand still for. Sometimes I don't want to feel angry, so I'll try to rush out of my anger. Or I don't want to feel sad, so I'll grab a cup of coffee or call a friend. But sometimes that's the moment where I need to sit and feel what I need to feel so it can pass, or I can understand it, or I can find a new way to move on, or maybe just let things be. We don't need to run from our lives. We don't need to run from our feelings. We don't need to run from being uncomfortable. Being uncomfortable will not kill us. That's what we think deep down, that we can't handle the feeling. But sometimes running from the feeling is empowering the feeling, and running from the feeling creates new problems and no resolution to the things that really bother us. So if we allow ourselves to feel uncomfortable, we're going to give ourselves the space for our relationships and our businesses and our feelings to let them be, allow new possibilities to come in, allow us to explore opportunities with more responsiveness and less reactiveness, and sometimes allowing things to be just the way they are. We find that we could find peace within any situation. Discomfort is not our problem. Our problem is our unwillingness to be with what is, to allow it in, to know that we can handle it, and we trust that we'll be okay no matter what. And with space and with pausing and with responsiveness, we will always find our way to live our best lives. Thank you for listening to this podcast today. If you'd like to get in touch with me, you could email me at allison@allisoncarmen.com. If you'd like to buy my books, The Gift of Maybe or Year Without Men, They're available at all major bookstores and online retailers. And if you like this podcast, you could subscribe and leave a comment.